And if you are watching this on a recording, hello from the past. I hope the future is nice. Cool, so let's go ahead and get started. I wanted to talk with you guys a little bit about inferring on the GMAT. I had a couple of questions regarding some inference things on the GMAT. And so I figured I might as well address some of those. So instances of inferences, if you will, on the GMAT. Let's go ahead and take a look at a statement. Jeff is 6 feet 2 inches tall, or about 1.88 meters. I'm going to ask you then, given that information, what can you infer? What conclusions can you draw from that fact? So take a moment and think about that. And if you feel like you have any inferences that you can draw, go ahead and send them in the chat room. I'm curious to know what you guys think. And if you're watching this on the recording, just kind of think about what are some things you can infer. Cool, I see JD sending some stuff in. Any other inferences we can draw here? All right, we got some good stuff coming in. Thanks for participating. I'm going to ask you guys to participate as we go. So let me throw up some answer choices, and we'll see if we can properly infer those. Jeff is an above average basketball player. Can you infer that from knowing that I'm 6 feet 2 inches tall? Well, you might expect me to be an above average basketball player. It would be reasonable to, assume that in the real world, right? Like think about how many people about that height that you've met. Are any of them really bad at basketball? Well, if the answer is no, allow me to introduce myself. My name's Jeff. I'm 6 feet 2 inches tall, and I am a very poor basketball player. So now you know a below average basketball player who is that height. You can't infer this on the GMAT, even though it's probably true. Chances are that it's true. That doesn't count for an inference on the GMAT. Let's take a look at another one. And I had a suggestion in chat that's along these lines. Jeff is taller than the majority of people at his place of employment. Does that have to be true? Well, again, you would expect so, right? But all that you have to do is come up with one situation where it's not true. So let's imagine a fantasy world now where I am really good at basketball and I'm so good that I play professionally. Chances are that 6'2" is not above average height for a professional basketball player. Or imagine a situation where I'm self-employed and I am my only employee. It would be impossible for me to be taller than the majority of people at my place of employment because I can't be taller than myself. So again, this is one where you would expect it to be true most of the time, but you can't legally infer it on the GMAT because there is a sliver of doubt in there. And so let's kind of continue this theme. Jeff can reach the top shelf at the grocery store. Hey, a lot of people expect me to do this when I go to the grocery store, but they might not know about the horrific badminton injury I suffered in the summer of 2011 or something like that, right? So again, you'd expect this to be true, but it doesn't have to be true. Jeff takes longer strides than his dog when they go for a walk. What if I like to take really tiny strides because I have low flexibility in my hips? Something like that. Doesn't have to be true. So A through D don't have to be true, which means E must be the answer. And this is pretty much exactly what JD stated. Jeff is taller than 6 feet. Jeff is taller than 5'10". And it kind of sticks out as being really obvious. Now, all of the inference questions on the GMAT aren't this obvious, but all of the right answers to inference questions on the GMAT are this true, okay? And that's kind of the big takeaway for right now. On the GMAT, inferences are things that are absolutely 100% things that must be true. And so even though I'm pretty sure B and D are going to be true, pretty sure doesn't cut it on a GMAT inference. So we're going to talk more about this in a bit, but I want to shift gears a little bit to talk about inferring in the quant section. And we're used to doing lots and lots of inferring in quant, right? We're given some information, and then from that, we have to derive some new essential information. And then eventually we kind of follow that chain of events and we'll end up at the correct answer, right? Okay, given this, what else can I determine with certainty? And if you think about it, really data sufficiency is just an exercise in knowing how far you can legally infer things. Can you infer enough to answer the data sufficiency question with one or both of the statements? Cool. So let's give that a shot on this question. And I'll give you a little bit of time to think about this. I'll hop off camera for a moment. Cool. So geometry questions are really great examples of when you have to do lots of inferring in quant, right? You're given some information from which you need to derive more. Taking a look at this shape or combination of shapes, what's something that you can infer? We know some of these givens, like OC, put a little dash here, OC and CD are the same. And then I've got a suggestion that, hey, OCD is a special kind of triangle, right? If two sides are equal in a triangle, then that also implies that two angles are equal, the opposite angles to those sides. And so, yeah, you've got an isosceles triangle at OCD. Good stuff. What else can you infer once you know that? And Andre has identified not just one isosceles triangles, but two of them. And this one's a little bit trickier to see because the line segments CD and OC being equal to each other are given in the prompt, and you have to kind of infer some stuff about the second isosceles triangle. Here we've got triangles interacting with a circle, and so you're going to have to understand what's the relationship between those triangles and the circle. And so what Andre is saying is, hey, OD is a radius of the circle, and so is AO, which means that AOD is also an isosceles triangle, which means that this angle over here on the left that I'm drawing is congruent to the other ones that I've drawn. Cool. So let's keep inferring here. I'm trying to eventually find out what the value of X is. Let me know in chat, what's the value of X? Can you figure out what X is? Let's take a look at that really large triangle here. The AOD triangle. Yeah, so absolutely, Karen says that X must be less than 90 degrees. You can, you know that as a fact because you have 90 degrees here. COD is some measure, and then you've got X being the leftover, that gets you to a total of 180. So if this is 90, x plus this little angle here has to be the other 90. So x has to be a little less than 90. Cool. And then we've got another suggestion in here that we got a handful of suggestions coming in, and I'll just kind of cut to the chase here. This is good stuff, everyone. Thank you. If you look at big triangle AOD, you have 3 of these red angles plus a right angle. And that equals a total of 180 degrees, right? So just to kind of double check that, we've got this angle, this angle, this angle, and then we have this right angle here that gives us a total of 180 degrees in the triangle. We know the right angle is 90, so that means the 3 red angles equal the other 90 degrees, which means 1 red angle is equal to 30 degrees. And if 1 red angle is equal to 30, then you can just go ahead and pencil this in as 30 degrees, and so x has to be 60. Good stuff. Cool, so lots of inferring done in geometry. I want to do a couple more quant problems and then contrast that with how you infer in verbal. So you're welcome to take a screenshot of this question if you want. Otherwise, let's go ahead and move on. I'll give you a little bit of time to think about this next question as well. Take a little time to think about this one, but don't throw it in chat. All right, I did have a quick question about that geometry one. So I'm going to go back really quickly. And thank you for asking the questions. That's great. Let's go back here. There's a question as to how all of these angles had to be the same. We had a couple of equilateral or a couple of isosceles triangles. We know COD is equal to CDO because CO is equal to CD. But we also knew that, hey, OD is a radius, so is AO, which means this larger triangle is isosceles. So those opposite angles are also equal. And so what we know is, hey, COD is equal to CDO, and CDO is equal to DAO. Cool. Yeah, thanks for asking the questions. You're welcome to ask the questions in chat or in the question and answer tab. Thanks. All right, let's go back to this one. The sum of 2 positive integers is 99. And I want you to take a moment, okay, and think about what you can infer from that. If the sum of 2 positive integers is 999, from that, what do you know? Yeah, I'm just looking at the first sentence right now, so let's not jump the gun. Yeah, I like this. So the sum is an odd number. Hey, this is odd. How do I add up 2 integers to get to an odd? And this is a great idea in chat. Hey, 1 integer is odd. 1 integer is even. Cool. A lot of inferring in quant is understanding what the GMAT's actually telling you, right? They're telling you one of the integers is odd, one of the integers is even, without them, explicitly telling you, right? They're making you do some of the work. Okay. Speaking of that, let's go on to the next sentence. Each of the integers has exactly 2 factors. What does that mean? What is the GMAT telling you without telling you there? All right, and I had a couple suggestions here. Hey, prime numbers are the only integers that have exactly 2 factors, right? 1 and the number itself. And so the GMAT is telling you here, or I guess I made this problem up, so I'm telling you, that both of the integers in question are prime. And I love prime numbers, so I'm putting an exclamation point there. All right, now let's combine those 2 kind of inferences we've made and answer the question. Both of the integers are prime. 1 is odd, 1 is even. What can you infer from that? Bam, there it is. You got to know that 2 is the first prime number. It's also the only even prime number. So if both of the integers are prime and one of them's even, then one of the integers is 2 and the other is 997. The difference between 999 and 2. Boom, there it is. So yeah, the larger one is the odd one, and it has to be 997. Go ahead and just box that so you know that this is the answer. Cool. Yeah, so the GMAT will kind of code things, right? Instead of telling you both integers are prime, they'll tell you something from which you should infer that same information. But it's a way that the GMAT can make, a problem a little bit harder, right? Make you do an extra step of the work, make you infer a little bit more. Let me pause here and just see if there are any questions about this problem. You guys are doing awesome work here. All right, if the questions do trickle in, I can always kind of hop back. But for now, I have one more question to show you, quant related. So let's take a look at this one, and this one's going to come in parts. All right, so Robbie's messing with his bookshelves, doing some reshuffling. Before he starts, the ratio of books on the top shelf to those on the bottom shelf is 4:3. All right, now think, what can you infer from that? What is the GMAT telling you without coming out and making it obvious? All right, absolutely. There are more books on the top shelf. I like that. And specifically, yeah, I got some really great suggestions coming in. You know that the books come in sets of 4 on the top and 3 on the bottom. But you don't know how many sets of 4 and 3 there are, right? So there could be a couple sets of 4 and 3 going across the bookshelves. And so hey, there's a multiple of 4 books on the top. There's the corresponding multiple of 3 books on the bottom. That means there's a group of 7 books in each set. So that is awesome stuff, everyone. You are great inferrers here. So the total number of books is a multiple of 7. Good stuff. All right, on to the next piece of the puzzle. All right, so we're going to move some books from the top to the bottom, but we're not moving any in the other direction. The new ratio of books on the top shelf to those on the bottom shelf is 11 to 9. What can you infer from this? And probably thinking along the same lines. I don't have the fingers to show this, right? But now there's like 11 books on the top shelf for every 9 on the bottom, which means you have sets of 20. So absolutely, the total number of books is also a multiple of 20. Now let's just kind of stop here and brainstorm a little bit. Hey, the total number of books is a multiple of 7 and it's a multiple of 20. What like could be the number of books on his bookshelves total? I'll take literally an infinite number of answers here. But yeah, there's some coming in. So we could have 140 books. All right, we could just kind of speculate a little bit. Could have 140, 280, 420, 560, etc. Some multiple of 140, because those are the types of numbers that are divisible by both 20 and 7. Good stuff. So let's take a look at the last part of the question. So Ravi definitely has 140 books. Ravi has 140 books. And let's kind of draw out what this looks like. We should be able to figure out how many he moved. Let's do a little bit of before and after. And we'll kind of organize, do top shelf, bottom shelf here. Have an opportunity to situate these things. Bottom shelf. And let's figure this out. Hey, before he started, how many books were on the top shelf? Yeah, 4-to-3 ratio. That means 4/7 of the book are on the top. So 1/7 of 140 is 20. So 4/7 would be 80 on the top, 60 on the bottom. Let's do the same thing for after he moves them. I guess 11-to-9 ratio. So 11/20 were on the top. 20th of 140 is 7. 11/20 would be 77. There would have to be 63 on the bottom. And so that implies that he moved 3 books. Good stuff. Ravi moved 3 books. Not a lot, moved 3 books. Not a lot of reorganizing happening there, but maybe they were like really tough decisions he had to make. I don't know, other things you might try to infer in the real world here would be like, hey, Ravi has really long bookshelves. You're putting 80 books on the bookshelf. Not necessarily, they could be very thin books, right? So you can't actually infer those things on the GMAT. They would be relatively reasonable real life inferences, but I'm sorry guys, the GMAT is not the real life. Cool. All right, that was really great stuff. I want to move on from Quant and talk about how inferring in verbal is a bit different from this. You know, in verbal, you'll have reading comp questions, critical reasoning questions that ask you to do some inferring. Or maybe better put, they'll ask you, hey, which of the following 5 answer choices can be properly inferred from the passage or from the argument. The correct answer will be logically sound. It'll be mathematically provable. It'll be axiomatic. In fact, sometimes the correct answer is just like a rewording of a given fact in the passage or the argument. So take a look at this question from the official GMAT prep software. And I'll give you about a minute to think about it. All right, I'll come back in a minute. All right, so guys, that's been about a minute. And if you're watching this on the recording and would like full time, go ahead and pause the recording for another minute. But let's go ahead and get to this one. All right. We can break this thing down sentence by sentence and just kind of say, hey, increases in HDL, thank you for the abbreviation, in the bloodstream, increases of that lower cholesterol by doing all this stuff. Cool. Increases lower cholesterol. And then the second sentence tells us that, it's kind of a passive voice sentence. Let's go ahead and make that active. Through exercise and weight reduction, exercise and weight reduction can cause HDL to increase for some people. Okay, so that's what those two sentences are saying. And let's now kind of situate those in like a causal chain. So first, we've got exercise and weight loss, and that stuff leads to an increase in HDL for some people, and then that leads to, I guess, lowering of cholesterol. And so there's kind of this chain of events. And so ultimately we start here, exercise and weight loss, and it allows cholesterol to decrease for some people. And if you look at this, this is pretty much exactly what D says. Like D is really just a kind of a rearranging, a rewording of the argument. And sometimes the correct inference, will pop out to you, right? Which of the following can be correctly inferred? But in tougher inference questions, the answer might not as readily pop out. So we want to use a more reliable approach. So in problem solving on Quant, right, inferring typically leads us to a single answer. The angle X was 60 degrees. The larger integer was 997. Ravi moved exactly 3 books. And we were able to answer or arrive at the answer of those questions without seeing a list of options, right? I didn't even present you with those as multiple choice questions. We just found the answer kind of out in the universe. On verbal, however, like it's usually impossible to infer all the way to a single answer. There are often many, many conclusions that you could draw from a reading comp passage or an argument. So rather than trying to hunt down the specific inference that the question is asking for, it's safer, more reliable, and therefore ultimately more preferable to just show that, hey, 4 of these don't have to be true. They're not proper inferences, so one of them is true, okay? So if you remember that an inference on the GMAT is something that absolutely must be true, go through the answer choices and just ask yourself, hey, does this particular answer choice have to be true, right? Does Jeff have to be an above average basketball player? No, obviously, right? So if not, you can eliminate that answer. And you should be able to eliminate 4 of those, leaving 1 left standing, and that will be the proper inference. So let's go ahead and do that for this one. I've already kind of spilled the beans a little bit that D is the correct answer, but let's find out why the other ones don't have to be true. Individuals who are underweight do not run any risk of developing high levels of cholesterol in the bloodstream. Does that have to be true? No, it's just the arguments about like how you can reduce your cholesterol levels a little bit. It doesn't talk about, levels of risk necessarily. And to say that individuals who are underweight don't run any risk, look how absolute that is. That's kind of ridiculous. That's ridiculous from common sense. And so you could come up with examples of people who are underweight and do have high cholesterol. So that one's got to go. Let's keep going. Answer B, does this have to be true? Individuals who do not exercise regularly have a high risk of developing high levels of cholesterol in the bloodstream late in life. I'd say it's a possibility and maybe even, relatively likely, but it doesn't have to be true. Maybe not every single individual who doesn't exercise regularly will have a high risk. I don't really know how high risk is defined. I'm not even sure what high levels of cholesterol, how you define that, like what's the threshold there? And when does late in life start? Like I have gray hair, am I already there? There's so much kind of like undefined parameters in this one that you could pretty easily find a reason to get rid of this one. Let's look at C. Exercise and weight reduction are the most effective methods of lowering bloodstream cholesterol levels in humans. Does that have to be true? What's problematic about answer C? I'm going to make you guys do some of the work here. What's problematic about answer C? Hit me up in the chat box. Yeah, a lot of people are throwing this out there. Too extreme, or it's the most effective. What are the other methods? How effective are they? How am I in any position to kind of judge how effective these are, compare how effective other methods are against exercise and weight reduction? So this most effective language, it's for the same reason that, this do not run any risk. It's just too extreme, too absolute. And look at E, the same reason. Hey, only regular exercise is necessary to decrease cholesterol levels. I don't think that's true, right? It sounds like regular exercise can help, but it doesn't say that regular exercise is the only thing. Again, too extreme. And so that leaves answer D, and look how flexible answer D's language is in comparison to the others. A program of exercise and weight reduction lowers cholesterol levels in the bloodstream of some individuals. Some could be 2. It could be 2 billion, right? There's just such a range there. I love the flexibility of D. So use that extreme language to get rid of A, B, C, and E. So, though inferences in verbal, can be shown to be, mathematically sound or axiomatic, that doesn't mean you always want to approach these problems the same way you approach inferences in quant. And in fact, I would say generally you don't want to do that, right? There are, I know a handful of, 780, 790, 800 GMAT scorers who approach inferences this way. Right? Getting rid of 4 wrong answers is just as good as finding 1 right answer. How we do sentence correction, right? You're not figuring out why the correct answer in sentence correction is the best. You're just finding out problems in the 4 wrong answers. Yeah. If there's a question in chat that was posed to me, if D had, instead of some, had all individuals, you could not say that that's a proper inference. That would be enough to rule it out, right? That sum matches the sum up here, okay? And so now saying this applies to all individuals, not necessarily, right? That kind of reduces out the flexibility of the language in D, which allows for the inference to hold. And you'll often find that these inferences in verbal aren't these like grand statements, right? Only regular exercise is necessary, right? It's just like, hey, this can help a few people, right? You're not really saying anything earth-shattering. And that tends to be kind of what the inferences look like. Cool. I have another one, a more substantial problem, all right? I don't think the answer is going to pop out as easily as D. So what I'd like you to do is to practice this process on this next question, okay? I'll give you another minute or so. I'll hop off camera. And again, if you're watching the recording, you can take a little bit more time. Let's go ahead and take a look at it. All right, well, we're just running past the 1 minute mark. So again, if you want a little bit more time on the recording, hit the pause button. But let's start talking about this one. And I have some answers coming into chat, and I will tell you they are not as unanimous as the last question, which is good. I got you a little bit more challenging of a question. So remember, we're going to try to evaluate, hey, do each of these have to be true? And that's kind of the language you're looking for in these questions. Like, which of the following statements about City College must be true, right? That's an inference, if the above information is true. So take this as true. Which of these are true? You'll also see language that says like, hey, which of the following conclusions can be drawn based on the facts given above? Or the argument or the facts given above, the statements above most strongly supports which of the following, right? Those are all the same type of, language, the phrasings that signify you're dealing with an inference question. All right, here's what I know. The chemistry department has the highest percentage of classes with 20 or more students, but the bio department has the highest percentage of classes with 30 or more students. So let's look at A. The percentage of bio classes with 40 or more students is greater than the percentage of chemistry classes with 40 or more students. Now, does that have to be true? I kind of see where they're going with that one. Maybe we can just kind of write this out a little bit. Let's say we have bio and we have chem. Actually, let's put chem on top. Bio is because we start with chemistry in the problem. And we've got different thresholds of students. It looks like we've got 20 or more students, 30 or more students, and 40 or more students. And let's just kind of come up with some percentages that would satisfy the information above, right? Because it says the information above is true. So let's kind of put in some percentages for some of these chemistry classes. So just figure out, hey, if chemistry has the highest percentage of classes with 20 or more students, let's just say the chemistry percentage is at 100. Let's say every single chemistry class has 20 or more students. And that can't be the true for bio. It has to have less than that. So it's at 90. All right, just pick numbers that work, right? We're trying to show that A doesn't have to be true. Now, something happens at the 30-person threshold. Chemistry falls behind bio. So let's say chemistry falls 20% down, but 20% there, but bio holds firm, right? So bio's in the lead now at 30. Now you might say to yourself, well, if biology just passed chemistry when you got to the 30-person mark, like it kind of leapfrogged chemistry, what's to say that the chemistry department couldn't just re-leapfrog the biology department at 40 students? And you could kind of come up with a situation here, like let's imagine that the biology department caps its classes at 35 students. So there aren't any classes that have 40 or more, whereas, I don't know, there's a few pretty big chemistry lectures or something. And so here you have kind of shown an example that disproves A, right? A does not have to be true because we've just come up with a scenario that disproves it. Let's take a look at B. Not all of the chemistry classes have either fewer than 20 or at least 30 students. Does that have to be true? Trying to think about what that means. Not all the chemistry classes have fewer than 20, at least 30. That one's pretty confusing. So let's not mess with the confusing one yet. Oftentimes the weird answer in critical reasoning is right because it brings in, or it deals with some information that you haven't really thought about yet. So let's go ahead and leave that one and come back to it in a bit. let's go take a look and see if we can get rid of some of these other ones, right? If we have to guess, go ahead and eliminate the easy ones to eliminate. So let's look at C now. The average number of students per class in the bio department is greater than that of the chemistry department. Well, average depends on the sum of students, right, divided by how many classes there are. And you might know that sums can be skewed a lot by outliers. So let's just imagine there's a chemistry class that has 500 people in it. No, don't even stop there. There's a chemistry class that has 1 billion people in it, okay? It's a really popular class at City College. There's 1 billion people in this chemistry class. That is going to totally warp the average number of students per class, right? Biology probably doesn't have a shot. So by placing this giant outlier in one of the chemistry classes, you can disprove C. And maybe I'll have a chance to talk about that one a little bit more after we talk through another one of these answer choices. The number of bio classes with at least 30 students is greater than the number of chemistry classes with at least 30 students. Well, does that have to be true? Let's go ahead and figure something out here, right? Let's test it out. Let's just suppose, hey, there's 100 classes of chemistry and only 10 classes of bio. Well, based on this is allowable. You can have a lot more total classes of chemistry than bio. If this happens, then what you're saying is, hey, 80% of the chem classes, that would be 80 chem classes total, have 30 or more students, but 90% of 10 is only 9. 9 bio classes have 30 or more students. So 80 versus 9, that would disprove D, right? And so actually I can use this grid to talk a little bit about average. Let me just add a couple boxes here. Let's say that we kind of kept this going and we said, hey, there's a chemistry class that has 1 billion students in it. We'll just say 1%. There's a single chemistry class that has 1 billion students in it. From that you could infer that there's over 1 billion total enrollees in only 100 classes. So the average chemistry class has over 10 million people in it. None of the bio classes have more than 40. So that just kind of proves C wrong. And let's look at E. The percentage of bio classes with at least 20 students enrolled is greater than the percentage of physics class with at least 20 students enrolled. Where is physics coming from? This one also doesn't have to be true. And this is they're just kind of throwing physics in here. We could add another category here for physics. And let's just say 95% of the physics classes had 20 or more. It didn't say that bio was in second place here. It just said chemistry was in front of bio and that bio was in first place here. So E doesn't have to be true. And so that leaves us with B. I guess B has to be true. Let me ask you this. Why does B have to be true? Why is this definitely true? I'll take a couple answers there. And kind of in the theme of our lesson, and maybe the best answer, the most efficient answer is that one has to be true because the other 4 don't, right? And the GMAT's not going to give you some trick question. None of these are true. One of them is going to work. A, C, D, and E are not the ones that work. So B has to be the one that's true. And you can be satisfied with that and move on with your life. But I imagine that a lot of us aren't going to be satisfied with that. And you'll want to see the proof. So again, you can prove these things, and it's something worth doing in your in your free time, proving inferences, GMAT inferences in your leisure time. But if you want to kind of get better at the logical thinking, worth doing kind of after the fact, after you've tried these problems, given yourself a 2-minute time limit. We're just gonna like take the percentages I used on the previous page and kind of fill some of these in here, and hope my handwriting isn't horrible. We said that, hey, all of the chemistry classes had 20 or more students, and only 90% of the bio classes had 20 or more. We also said, hey, 90% of the bio classes had 30 or more, and that was greater than the chemistry percentage for the corresponding threshold. Only 80% were there. Now, if we kind of look at this more generally, I'll just kind of put some letters here. Let's call this box A and box B. And we'll just go clockwise, box C and box D. What we know is, well, at 20 or more students, chemistry's percentage is greater than bio. So we know that A is greater than B. On the other hand, at 30+ students, we know that bio is greater than chemistry's percentage. So we know that, hey, C was greater than D. Now here's the rub. What's the relationship between B and C? Because if I know this relationship, I should be able to link all of my letters. Think about the relationship between 20+ students and 30+ students. It's not necessarily that B has to equal C. It does here, right? It just happens to here. But it's impossible to have C be greater than B, right? 30 or more students is like a subset of 20 or more students, right? It's like if you're a square, you're a rectangle, not necessarily the other way around, right? So B can be greater or equal to C, but C cannot be greater than B, right? Because it's a subset of B. So if I kind of put all of that in a chain here, what's implied is that A must be greater than D. And that's why you see this kind of decrease in number here. And now what that means then for the chemistry classes is, hey, you lost some classes, right? Going from 20+ students to 30+ students. Some of them didn't make the next cut, right? So that means if you only had 5 chemistry classes, all 5 of them have 20 or more students, only 4 of them have 30 or more students. That means one of them was left in the 20s, right? One of those classes was left in the 20s. And so if we go here and kind of just draw this out as like a number line for B, if I sketch the number line, number curvilinear, and I said, hey, here's 20, here's 30 students, we know that one of the classes has to be there. So not all of the classes fall this way or this way. Technically, that should be an open circle. Open circle. And that's basically what B is saying. Now, B is really difficult to, I think, come to that conclusion initially, right? I think I would have a really hard time coming to that conclusion, but it's a lot easier to get rid of the 4 wrong answers. And, that's the takeaway here, right? Yeah, I'm glad to hear that kind of that breakdown of the inequalities helps. It's kind of amazing when you see the math behind some of these verbal inferences, right? Oh my gosh, they are that logical. There is something, perfectly mathematically true about that inference. It's so difficult to see that, in the 2 minutes you're given on this problem. So don't look for it, right? Just look for the ones that are wrong. And that's the strategy that, you know, the top GMAT takers use. And so I would recommend that one to you guys 100%. Guys, that was awesome. You guys are really great. I would like to kind of pause it here and field some questions. You're welcome to ask me questions in chat. I think I can keep up with that. Or you can ask me questions in the Q&A box. And there were a couple questions that I maybe wanted to get to in the list that was sent to me. I'll just kind of wait a moment to see if anyone has any questions to send in. Yeah, and I would say right now, questions can be related to pretty much whatever. I'll see what I can do, see how prepared I am to handle, you know, anything you throw at me. I know you guys probably have some questions about the new GMAT format, which I guess goes into effect in a few days. Ultimately, my thoughts on that are, I don't think it's going to make much of a difference on the whole. I think, you know, a 700 still means a 700 this week and next week. Yeah, the test is getting a little shorter. Lucky you, right? Now you guys have a shorter test, and you get to choose the order in which you want to take the sections. I really envy the people who are going to take the GMAT now. But, you know, it's like you're not running a marathon. You're just going for a leisurely 22-mile run. So it's still pretty much the same. But, you know, in marathons, a lot of people hit the wall in mile 24 or 25. So a lot of people really kind of start struggling toward the end of the 75-minute section. So maybe having shorter sections is going to help quite a bit. Let's see. In the new format, should we still consider SCs about 120? That's a good question. Yeah, I recommend trying to get your sentence corrections, you know, a minute 20 or faster. If you can save an extra 10 seconds on each of those questions, you have more time to think through, you know, some of these tougher critical reasoning questions and reading passages. The reduction in question, is it proportionally reduced? So what I've heard is you're still probably going to have 4 reading comps, so that makes things a little bit wacky. You might not have, you know, as many questions on all of them. So they're kind of holding all that info close to the vest there. But I would still use your normal time per question ranges. So yeah, about 115, 120 on sentence correction, about 2 minutes on critical reasoning. And if you want to spend some more time on critical reasoning, the best place to kind of save that time is to get more efficient at sentence correction. I don't think the percentiles are going to get any different, right? You know, the only thing that the GMAT says they're doing is they're taking out some of the experimental questions. So you're still going to have the same number of, you know, scored questions. There will just be fewer experimental questions. So the number of questions that end up going to your raw score and therefore your percentiles will remain unchanged. Cool. There were a couple questions online. Someone asked this one, which I think is pretty pertinent because it's going to affect everyone at some point. I'm taking the GMAT in a week. I feel prepared, but what can I do during my last week so I'm not overthinking or overstudying? Yeah, and I think a lot of people have the tendency to really want to cram in this last week. And I think that can be very counterproductive sometimes, right? Now you're flooding your brain with all these things you think you should know come test day. And then, you know, that might just get distracting at the test, right? Oh, I was supposed to remember this, and I studied this just yesterday, and why can't I think of it? I'd say the last week is to really kind of come to terms with your strengths and your weaknesses and to really focus on executing your game plan. So, for example, if I know a week out of my official test that I am just not very good at, pick something, ratios, okay? I don't know if I'm going to spend a lot of time like trying to get really good at ratios in that last week. I'll just understand that, hey, if I get into the test and I see a question about ratios that looks pretty tough for me, I'm not going to spend, 4 minutes on this struggling, probably to get it wrong. I'm going to spend 4 seconds on it, and I'm going to, save my other, 3 minutes and 56 seconds for better questions from me. Right? But one of the worst things you can do is spend lots and lots of time on questions that are hard for you. Right? You want to spend the least amount of time on questions that are hard for you. So understanding kind of your game plan, recognizing what your strengths and weaknesses are, and then committing to those on the test. You don't have to get every question right on the GMAT. You can give yourself some free passes and say, yeah, if I'm feeling the time pressure and I see a question that pertains to my weak area, I'm just gonna, save my time and move on. Yeah, suggestions on to skip questions faster. It's kind of recognizing early on what types of questions you want to skip. Right, so I would say skip questions that are in your weak area, because if they're in your weak area, you have a lower chance of getting it right anyway with lots of effort and lots of time. So you're probably not sacrificing too much, guessing pretty quickly on it. So you're saving a lot of time, but not sacrificing lots of potential points there. Yeah, I would still say you can still skip a few questions here and there. Again, you can miss 30% of the questions on the GMAT and get a 90+ percentile score. Happens pretty often. So don't feel the pressure of trying to get every question right. Just kind of understand, hey, I'm not going to get every question right. I'm okay with that. A 70% might have been a low score on college exams and things like that. A 70% accuracy rate on the GMAT's quite good. So cool. There's one other question that came in, and I'll just kind of get to it. If you had to do one exam, Manhattan or GMAT Prep, official GMAT Prep, if you had to do one of the exams only once, which would it be? That kind of depends on your time frame. I will say the Manhattan CATs are very nice because they provide you with lots of great analysis, right? They'll show you how you spent your time on questions, where your strengths are, section by section, topic by topic, where your weaknesses are, difficulty level of questions that you've answered correctly and incorrectly. And that kind of data can really help. But you can't beat the test makers at their own game. So the GMAT Prep official exams are going to be kind of the most realistic representation of what you can expect to see on test day. So if you have time to prep, and by that I mean, more than 2 weeks, I would say you would probably be better off taking a Manhattan CAT, just because you get to see some of the analysis and see some of the areas that you should focus on over the the length of your study time. But if you're getting closer and closer to exam day, well, now we kind of just talked about, you don't want to be cramming lots in the last week. What you want to do is try to get comfortable with what the exam is going to look like and practice implementing your game plan. And it's probably best to do that on something that simulates the official test as much as possible, and that would be the GMAT Prep practice exams. You should know that if you sign up at MBA.com, you get 2 free practice tests, GMAT Prep exams, as well as some question banks. Please do that. Don't let that resource go unclaimed. So yeah, go ahead and get your GMAT Prep exams. Good stuff. So we're about 9 o'clock. Hold on 1 second. So now that there are fewer experimental questions, we ideally not skip questions. So, I mean, ideally, you don't have to skip any questions, right? But the GMAT is not an ideal test for a lot of test takers. So you're still going to have to probably find some questions to skip unless you are really strong on the subject as a whole. I will tell you, when I take the official GMAT, there are questions that I don't feel that great about, and I have to cut my losses and guess. If you feel really strong in quant or in verbal, it might be that you don't feel like it might be that you never have to skip a question. But for most people, you know, you're going to run into some questions that are really challenging, and you just, you know, have to make a decision, right? A higher level decision. Am I going to spend my time on this question, or am I going to save that time for questions I'll probably feel good about later? So, I mean, that really kind of depends on who you are. But I don't think the fact that there are fewer experimental questions should really weigh into, you know, how you approach, you know, skipping here and there. If anything, now that there are fewer questions total, you know, maybe you don't want to skip quite as many, but it's still okay to give yourself, you know, a couple free passes per section. Cool. I just want to remind you that this free GMAT prep hour is offered a couple times a month generally. We'll have Liz Maliski teaching towards the end of April, and you're all welcome to sign up for that. I'm in the DC area, so you know, if you sign up for class, I hope to see you around somewhere, or see you at an event. I run some of the Manhattan Prep event tables, MBA tour and other tours like that. So this recording will be available. I think it'll be put on our YouTube channel. I'm not quite sure when that happens. Probably, maybe it has to go through some editing. People might have to edit all my mistakes. But it should be up, I'd say, within the week. So yeah, this recording will be available on the YouTube, the Manhattan Prep YouTube channel at some point. So yeah, go ahead and check that out if you want to review any of the content. Otherwise, hope to see you at another one of these events in the future. Thanks so much for hanging out with me for the last hour, and I will see you around, I hope. Thanks again. Bye.